What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here. In today's video, I wanted to break down the best and worst lost sectors in the game to farm. I will go over all 9 lost sectors that you can currently run at this time and break down why I think it is either good, bad, or somewhere in between for farming exotics. One thing to note is we'll be discussing the master variants of these lost sectors. The master versions always have a few more champions and are 30 light level higher for recommended power. However, they supposedly give an increased chance of getting an exotic. So if you are at light and can farm them quickly, it will be the best use of your time to do so. That being said, if a lost sector is good to farm on master difficulty, it will probably still be quick to farm on legend. And if a lost sector is quite difficult on master, it will also probably be more difficult to farm the legend variant. And one final thing to note is the modifiers for the lost sectors may change in the future, which could either benefit us or hinder us depending on the enemy types and the type of damage that they do. So just something to note. So with that out of the way, let us start on Europa, and go in the order with which they rotate in-game. This means that Concealed Void is the first one up. Concealed Void is a fallen lost sector with Arachno and Chaff as our negative modifiers. Chaff just disables our radar, which is not a bad modifier at all, especially after a few runs when you learn the enemy locations. As well, it is a pretty linear lost sector, so you won't have too many ads sneaking up on you. We also have the modifier Arachno, which causes Vandals to spawn a web mine at their feet when defeated. There are not a whole lot of Vandals in this lost sector, so again, not a very bad modifier at all. One pretty strong downside is we have a modifier increasing arc and aerial damage, and most of the enemies in this lost sector deal arc damage. It also has solar burn, so the final boss can really do some big damage to you. But on the flip side, if you are running a strong solar heavy like the Lament, or a strong super like Dawnblade with Dawn Chorus, then you can output big damage and melt the boss quite quickly. The toughest part in this lost sector is probably the beginning. That is because you have a barrier servitor making a bunch of the enemies immune. If you have watched my how-to videos for beating lost sectors, you know how much I hate these guys. If you can get this guy down quickly, however, the rest of the lost sector should not be too bad. Once you get a good strat for the opening room down, you can probably farm this very quickly. Try and get a build that allows you to shred the final boss quickly, and you will not even have to deal with the ads in the final room, and you will still get a platinum clear. My fastest time at 1330 light was 4 minutes and 11 seconds. For a platinum lost sector, that is not bad at all. As I said, the opening room can be kind of a pain, but when you can consistently farm in under 5 minutes, I think that warrants a great rating. It isn't the fastest lost sector, but it is far from the worst. The negative modifiers are about as good as it gets, as they honestly barely affect your run. So if you need an armor piece and it is on Concealed Void that day, hop in and get farming. The next lost sector on the Europa rotation is Bunker E15. This is a Vex lost sector with a few fallen enemies at the start. It has my least favorite modifier, Attrition, which greatly impairs health regeneration unless you pick up a Well of Light. This is probably the most oppressive negative modifier that there is for all the lost sectors, so right away we are off to a rough start. We also have Shocker, which causes goblins to spawn arc pools that cause damage over time. This modifier definitely has more of an effect than the arc webs from the last lost sector. 1, because they actually damage you and don't just slow you, and 2, because there are far more goblins in this lost sector. We also have increased arc and aerial damage, so the arc pools will cause quite a bit of damage. We also have Void Burn, and it really hurts here, as the Overload Minotaurs, Wyverns, Cyclops, and the Hydra final boss all deal damage with Void Blast, so they hurt a hell of a lot. Much like the last lost sector, the opening room can be a bit of a challenge, especially if you are not on a Warlock, because if you take damage early, you can't really get your health back because jumping down to get a Well of Light will likely get you killed. Warlocks can just use a Healing Rift though. But once you are through this part, it is pretty straightforward until the boss room. Barrier Hobgoblins are much easier to deal with than Barrier Servitors, but Overload Minotaurs are much tougher to handle than Overload Captains, so it's kind of a pick your poison type of deal. Captains can be stun locked, but Overload Minotaurs will just keep charging you. If you are at light, this may not be too bad because if you can kill them in one stun, you will be fine. But if they charge you and they have their stun immunity up, you are most likely dead from that Void Blast. Overall, you have to slow play this lost sector more than most of the others. As well, you basically have to kill all the ads before you can get the final chest. You can't really melt the boss because of the Minotaurs that all spawn in the boss room. So between the health gated boss and a boss and Overload Minotaurs that do 50% more damage due to Void Burn, as well as not being able to regenerate your health from attrition, I have to throw this lost sector in the bad category. It is just too annoying with attrition to try and farm. It is definitely possible to get some quick times, but other times you may be stuck running for your life waiting 20 seconds to regen your health. This makes it an inconsistent farm, and inconsistency is bad when you are trying to farm efficiently. I think my quickest time while at light this season was 5.5 minutes, so not too bad, but far from the best, and other runs may take you even longer. Not saying you can't do it if you want, but just saying it is far from ideal. The last one on Europa is my personal favorite, the Perdition lost sector. This lost sector is a Vex lost sector with the modifiers Famine and Shocker. Famine greatly reduces our ammo drops, but I have found that ammo finder mods really help to combat this. And the Shocker mod is a bit more annoying in this lost sector than the last one due to arc burn being on here. So you really have to watch where you are walking or the arc pools will melt you quickly. On top of that, arc and aerial damage is increased, so if you try and jump out of the pool, you will likely die. Aside from that though, it is a pretty easy lost sector. You have void shielded minotaurs and arc shielded harpies, so your loadout selection may be somewhat limited, but it is not too bad to deal with. I ran this lost sector with only a sword though and got a 1 minute 51 second clear. So for that fact alone, this lost sector has to go in the best category. A sub 2 minute master platinum clear of a lost sector is almost unheard of, unless you are way above light level or an absolute god at the game. And even with other loadouts, 3 to 4 minute clears are easily achievable and very consistent. This is a pretty relaxed farm, all things considered. Even at low light, it is not too bad if you are able to take out the overload minotaurs, of which there are only 2. The rest of the lost sector is fairly easy because you have lots of cover to work with. I cannot recommend farming this one enough, and if you ever beat my 1 minute 51 second time, please let me know in the comments and let me know what loadout you used. And that is it for the Europa lost sectors. Let us now bounce over to the Cosmodrome and take a look at their lost sectors. Again, we are going in order of the rotation in-game, so first up we have Exodus Garden 2A. This is a fallen lost sector with Scorched Earth and Attrition as the modifiers. We all know how much I hate Attrition, so right away we are off on the wrong foot. We also have Scorched Earth, which is a very annoying pairing with Attrition, as when you are trying to hide to get your health back, enemies will be lobbing grenades at you at a frantic pace, making it very difficult to do anything. Solar and environmental damage is increased, so the orange bar dregs and the marauders can actually chunk your health down very quickly. There is also Void Burn, which is rough at the end, as the servitor boss's Void Blast can really hurt. With all that being said, this lost sector can be farmed quite quickly in fact. At 13:30, my quickest time was 3 minutes 45 seconds. However, there is a lot working against you in this lost sector. Remember when I said consistency was key when it comes to farming lost sectors? Yeah? Well, this is the most inconsistent lost sector out there, and there are a couple of reasons why. Reason number 1, as is the case with all fallen lost sectors, is barrier servitors. These annoying bastards like to make everything immune, which can be a massive pain. Reason number 2, teleporting ads. No other lost sector has ads teleporting like this one does, not even close. You'll be focused on a champion, about to kill it, and 2 teleporting ads will warp up behind you and melt you. And if they don't kill you, well, you have to back up and wait 20 seconds to regen your health. I can't even describe to you how much this annoys me. I love consistency, and this is the exact opposite of that. And the third and final reason is the boss room. You have one big boss servitor surrounded by 2 barrier servitors. Well, the barrier servitors like to warp around and dodge your shots and hide behind cover. It is best to take out the boss first, but even once he is down, you'll have ads constantly running up one by one to attack you. So it is not even like you can take them all out at once and then focus the barrier servitors, because they don't come at you all at once. And they will hide behind cover and lob grenades at you. It is a frustrating experience. With all that being said, I still have to give it a decent rating. With experience, you can somewhat learn the enemy spawns and how to deal with all these issues. As I said before, I got a sub 4 minute clear, so it is not all bad. Will you enjoy your time farming this? No, not really. But will it be somewhat efficient? Time-wise, yes it will. Hell, my sadistic ass even farmed this 17 times whilst under light on my Titan to get the new chest piece Cuirass of the Falling Star when the season first started. So yes, you can farm this and it will be a decent use of your time. Just be warned, you will come to hate the inconsistency of it. Moving on to brighter pastures now, and what a pasture it is. Mine, and probably everybody else's favorite, Veles Labyrinth. Right away, this lost sector has something going for it that none of the other lost sectors have had so far, and that is that it is a hive lost sector. What does that mean, you ask? Well, it means you will deal with unstoppable ogres and barrier knights, which means no health regenning overload champions of any kind, and no immunity shielding barrier servitors. What a breath of fresh air. So right away, things are looking up. For negative modifiers, we have Fire Pit, which causes acolytes to spawn fire pools that cause damage over time, and Chaff, which disables our radar. Again, probably the chillest modifier to deal with. And once again, it is a linear lost sector, so ads won't really be creeping up on you. We do have increased solar and environmental damage, so the solar grenades the acolytes lob will hurt, but nothing we can't deal with. And we have Arc Burn, so the Arc Blast from the Barrier Knights and the final boss will melt you very quickly if you aren't careful, but there are ways to avoid this for sure. The most inconsistent part of this Lost Sector is by far the opening part in the cave. You have a bunch of Thrall and Curse Thrall that rush in, as well as Barrier Knight. Anarchy, an Arc Rocket Launcher, or Warmind Cells will be your best friend here. Take out the swarms of adds, and the second you see the Knight, put in damage and stun him immediately. Again, the Arc Blast will melt you, so this is your number one priority. From there, the Lost Sector is very straightforward. Take out the remaining champions and then jump up to the left by the chest and spawn kill the boss. There are a number of ways to do this, but my favorite is Chaos Reach with Geomags. My fastest run was 2 minutes 13 seconds just last week. Sadly, I wasn't recording the run, but I had perfect RNG on the adds in the cave, and then I nailed the rest of the Lost Sector. I was using the Succession Sniper with Anti-Barrier Sniper, Igneous Hammer with Unstoppable Hand Cannon, and the Shining Sphere Rocket Launcher with Autoloading Holster. It was a blazing time, but I was averaging 2.5 minute clears easily and consistently. Perdition is a chill farm as well, but I think this one is the chillest and easiest by far, so it definitely goes in the best category. Again, if you have a quicker run than 2 minutes and 13 seconds on Master with Platinum, please let me know down below and tell me what you are using. I love cool and fast builds, and I'm always looking to try something new. And with that, we are done with the Cosmodrome. And now we move on to the Moon to try out the new Lost Sectors that were implemented this season. And sadly, what goes up must come down. We went from the easiest farm in the game in Veles Labyrinth to the worst planet for farming in general. Not sure why Bungie made these ones so much more difficult, but alas, they did. It may not even be that they are more difficult, but they are certainly longer and they have more champions and enemies than any of the Lost Sectors we've already covered. So let us jump into the first Lost Sector, K1 Logistics. This is a Fallen Lost Sector with the modifier Hot Knife, which adds solar shields to Shanks, and Chaff, which disables our radar. So not too bad for modifiers. However, you need something for the solar Shank shields, and something Arc for the few Arc shielded captains. So loadout wise, you are somewhat limited. To complicate this matter, you have Void Burn, but you definitely cannot spec all into Void. Off the rip, you have to take a captain out and some marauders. And then you have a barrier servitor who shields 2 sniper vandals and sometimes more enemies if you are unlucky. It is tough to focus the enemies because they hide behind cover a lot or are immune, and it is tough to focus the servitor because you will get melted by the enemies. So you have to play very safe and smart and slow here. After this, you have another room with champions and adds that spawn in. You also have to deal with teleporting adds sometimes, though not as bad as Exodus Garden 2A. With that being said, you do have your radar disabled, so you must keep your head on a swivel. If the Overload Captain isn't shielded by the servitor, he's most likely teleporting around like a cheater in Trials when the Igneous Hammer was the Adept reward. This can be very frustrating. When you finally do make your way to the boss room after slogging through the adds, you will have a couple barrier servitors to contend with and an Overload Captain, as well as Solar Shanks and Arc Captains. And all the adds are at a great distance. Again, you just have to play slow and steady. It is not that this Lost Sector is particularly difficult, but we're not rating these on difficulty. We're rating these on the ability to farm them quickly and efficiently. And unless you're an absolute god, that just isn't the case here. And even if you are a god, you know that there are a lot quicker and easier farms than this. My best time at light here was 7 minutes 46 seconds, which isn't awful, but for comparison's sake, all the previous 5 Lost Sectors were 2 to 4 minute farms, with the exception of Bunker E15 being 5.5 minutes. So you can basically farm 2 Lost Sectors in the time it takes to farm this one once. And for that reason, I am giving this one my first, but definitely not my last, don't bother. It just really isn't worth the slow and steady playstyle. I just can't justify farming this Lost Sector when there are so many quicker and easier ones out there. Be patient and wait to farm another day. The next Lost Sector on the Moon is K1 Communion. This Lost Sector has Arachno and Famine. Arachno is not too oppressive here as you are fighting all the adds from far away. And Famine once again can be countered pretty easily with Finder mods in my experience. It is a Fallen Lost Sector and we have increased Void and aerial damage. This is very forgiving as nothing outside of the barrier servitors does Void damage. And we have Solar Burn. The boss does solar damage as well as the Overload Captains, so you gotta be wary of that. However, you can make some super strong Warmind Cell solar builds here. My personal favorites were Bottom Tree Sunbreaker with Hollowfire Heart and Top Tree Dawn Warlock with Sunbracers. From a fun standpoint, this is actually a pretty fun Lost Sector. Or maybe I am just an insane Destiny masochist and I enjoy playing difficult content. I'll let you be the judge of that. I don't know if it's because I found wonderful builds for this Lost Sector or what, but I genuinely enjoyed farming this Lost Sector. However, and this is a big however, this lost sector has the most enemies of all the lost sectors at 129, and the most champions of any lost sector at a whopping 11. So now that I think about it, yeah, something is probably just wrong with me. However, if you are like me, and like Destiny to cause you pain, then by all means, farm away. But if you are smart and like to analyze data, stay away. The fastest time I could muster here was an 8-minute 38-second clear at 1330 light. I could farm Perdition 4 times in that time, and Veles Labyrinth 3 times. So as far as a farm, I have to give it a don't bother rating. That being said, if you like watching enemies explode all over the place, provided you are running one of the Warmind cell builds that I broke down here, then give it a go. This may be literally the worst lost sector in terms of farming, but for the moon lost sectors, it may be the funnest. At least in my opinion. So if that moon lost sector is the funnest, what is the least fun? Well, conveniently, that one is up next. K1 Crew Quarters, ladies and gentlemen. This has everything I hate in a lost sector. My most hated modifier? You betcha, we got attrition, baby. Want to regen your health? That'll be 20 seconds, bud. Want to use whatever guns you want to match the burn? Nah, we're gonna throw on Hot Knife in there so you have to deal with solar shields on all the shanks. Speaking of burn, oh yeah, it's arc. The same thing the Overload captains shoot and that literally track you around walls. You know, where you are hiding for 20 seconds to regen because of attrition. So that's fun. And if you get tagged even once, say just as you are about to start regenning health, well, that's gonna be another 20 seconds, so get comfy behind your cover, pal. Oh yeah, this one has lots of sniper vandals too. And what do they shoot? Arc. And what kind of grenades do the dregs lob? Arc. So as you can probably tell, this lost sector is a hoot. It also has barrier servitors that shield tons of enemies at once, and invisible marauders that like to sneak up on you. And once you get to the boss, you will be rushed by wretches with, you guessed it, arc spears that they will try and melee you with. Funnily enough, my quickest time on this lost sector was 7 minutes, which is actually quicker than K1 Logistics and K1 Crew Quarters. But with the mixture of modifiers that I just described, this definitely earns a do not bother. Yes, you can farm it decently fast, and maybe I'm just a whiny crybaby, but I would far sooner run K1 Communion over and over for the fun factor, even if it takes 2 minutes longer on average, than slog through dealing with the modifiers of this lost sector. Maybe I should have made a tier below this one called F that, because seriously, F this lost sector. It is not a super slow farm, but at 7 minutes at best and probably 8 on average, it is firmly in the don't bother category. And that brings us to our 9th and final lost sector, K1 Revelation. Like Veles Labyrinth, it has a leg up right away in that it is a hive lost sector. And I will deal with unstoppable ogres over overload champions any day. So that is a plus. We have Fire Pit and Chaff, just like Veles Labyrinth, and we have increased void and aerial damage taken, on top of void burn. The beauty is we can run all void here, as there is just one arc shielded knight at the end, and you can handle that with your loadout if you're smart about it. The negative here? Well, it has the second most enemies at 114, and tied for the second most champions at 10, so it is a bit of a slog, especially for how it is set up. All your engagements will be at range, so depending on future artifacts, this could get easier or harder depending on what you can use. This lost sector was second slowest of all, with my fastest time being 8 minutes and 9 seconds, but what it lacks in speed, it makes up for in relaxation. It really is not a hard lost sector. You just have to play slow and steady. The only difficult part is at the very end where you have to deal with 2 barrier knights at once amongst the sea of ads. But everything to that point is fairly chill. So is it an efficient farm? No. But if you struggle in lost sectors, I would almost have to put this in the decent category just because of how easy it is. You always have cover, everything is predictable, so if you're just trying to get through a lost sector, maybe not to farm but just to get the new exotic, this one may be the easiest of all. I know the criteria was most efficient farm, but I'm also trying to look out for less experienced players who may just be trying to get an exotic. The other 3 moon ones can be quite difficult, so they would be tough for a new player. The Europa lost sectors all have difficult elements as well, with the barrier servitor at the start of Concealed Void and overload minotaurs in Perdition and Bunker E15. I already stated how annoying Exodus Garden 2A can be, despite it being relatively quick when you get a good strat down, and even Veles Labyrinth can be difficult in the cave with the barrier knight. As well, dealing with 2 unstoppable ogres at once at the end may be tough for a newer player. This lost sector, in my opinion, grants the most predictability of all. You can systematically work your way through each part and deal with one knight by itself. and then after that you can deal with one unstoppable ogre at a time. The tough part would come at the end with 2 barrier knights, I suppose, but I think for an introductory Lost Sector, this one is about as good as it gets. So I'm going to stick with the decent rating just based on difficulty here and not farming efficiency. After all, it is my video and my tier list. I can change the criteria at the end if I want. But even in saying that, there's something to be said for ease of clearing. Sure, others may be faster, but if you are always dying, it isn't going to be that fast at all. At least this one is fairly chill. So let us take a look at the overall rankings of all the Lost Sectors. In the best category, we have Perdition and Veles Labyrinth. These Lost Sectors can both be easily and consistently farmed in under 3 minutes when you are at light. And even when you are below light, they are relatively quick clears compared to the others. Anytime you have a chance to get an exotic every 3 minutes, that is some elite efficiency. Concealed Void is the only Lost Sector in the great category. You can get some easy sub 5 minute times, but because of the inconsistency that barrier servitors provide, it keeps it just out of the top spot. In the decent category, we have Exodus Garden 2A and K1 Revelation. Exodus Garden 2A is a Lost Sector that can be cleared quite quickly, but with too many negative modifiers and inconsistent elements to rank it anywhere higher. Conversely, K1 Revelation doesn't have very many difficult aspects to it. It is a slow and steady Lost Sector, and you can just pick your way through the ads. But its pros of being easy and consistent are offset by the negatives of it being slow. Therefore, it is no better than decent, and you could argue for it to be ranked lower because of that. In the bad category, we have Bunker E15. The main detractor in this Lost Sector is firstly the modifier attrition. Anytime that modifier is present, it is not ideal. And secondly is just how annoying overload minotaurs are. If you cannot kill them in one stun, you could have a tough time in this Lost Sector. Also, the boss is kind of tough to melt, making it hard to get super quick clears. Therefore, bad is the rating. Lastly, we have the don't bother Lost Sectors. These ones, quite frankly, are not worth your time whatsoever, and they are all on the moon. As mentioned before, the moon Lost Sectors have the most ads and the most champions. Throw in the fact that they are all overload captains and barrier servitors, and you have a recipe for slow clears and a lot of beating your head against your desk. Unless you are well above light, there is just not much you can do at all to speed up the clear times of these Lost Sectors. Therefore, it is best to just not bother and just wait to farm some of the better Lost Sectors. And that is going to do it for the video. I've been looking forward to making this tier list for a long time. I farmed the hell out of all these Lost Sectors the last 2 seasons, and I look forward to doing it more in the future. I find them to be a great place to test out builds, and they are low-key great glimmer farms. One final thing I want to show you is this spreadsheet I made with all the Lost Sector data. It breaks down how many enemies and champions there are, the enemy faction, the modifiers, and my personal best times for when I was below light and when I was at light. Now that I am 1335, I can probably get some quicker times, but it gives you a really good barometer for each Lost Sector, and may help you to understand why I ranked certain Lost Sectors where I did. One thing to note is sometimes in Bunker E15 I got 3 Minotaurs at the end, and other times I got 4. Not sure why, it's quite strange, and I even verified it by watching the videos back to make sure. Also, I'm not sure why the Cosmodrome and Europa Lost Sectors average 6 or 7 champions, and the Moon Lost Sectors average 10 to 11. Seems silly and a bit unfair. It makes it quite obvious that you don't want to farm Moon Lost Sectors, and even the enemies on average are higher on the Moon than the others by quite a bit. I doubt it will happen, but it would be cool to see them lower the enemies and champions a bit on the Moon to make them slightly more viable for farming, because right now it is just not worth it. Anyways, let me know down in the comments if you have some killer builds for farming some of these Lost Sectors. I always love trying out new fun builds. If you are struggling with Lost Sectors and want to farm them and your light is fairly high, I've made farming guides for every single one. And if you are under light, I have guides as well for beating every Lost Sector on every class while below light. So if you are just trying to get through them, maybe you will find value in those. Feel free to peruse the channel if you need help with a certain Lost Sector or are just looking for build ideas. When it is late in the season, it is a great time to farm these. You have high artifact power, so they will be easier. And aside from Guardian games, there's nothing much else to do right now, so might as well go for some God Roll exotics. If you liked this video, then a positive rating would be greatly appreciated. And if you agree or disagree with my rankings, tell me why down below. I would love to hear your take. I had a ton of fun making these Lost Sector builds this season, and I had even more fun working on this video and breaking down what makes these Lost Sectors good or bad. But that is it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it, and take care.